one from the audience.
We will start in about 60 seconds at the most, so please know that if you've got questions, to hold them up and we'll gather them. Thank you. Good evening. Good evening, and welcome to the first of two ballot forums that are sponsored by the Sioux Falls League of Women Voters. You'll hear us refer to that as League, and OLLI, which stands for the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. I'm Carol Muller, and I'll be representing the League of Women Voters tonight. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization, encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. In support of voter education, tonight's forum will address three of the issues South Dakotans will vote on for this fall, and we will present them in this order. The first will be the sales tax on food, second will be the recreational marijuana, and third is referred law from the most recent legislative session regarding landowners' rights. If you didn't get a copy of this, you might want to step out and grab one, because they've been really helpful to provide better wording and those types of things. So tonight, we're going to go ahead and get started. We do have an empty seat at this point, but we understand that Mr. Weiland should be here shortly. So in the meantime, we have Nathan Sanderson, who will be addressing the vote no, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
On this issue. So the format for tonight: each speaker will have 7 minutes to present their side. Each speaker will have 90 seconds to respond to questions written by the audience. There is no rebuttal or closing comments, and we will finish by 7:30 p.m. The forum is being live streamed on the Sioux Falls League of Women Voters YouTube page. The recording of this event is owned by the Sioux Falls League of Women Voters and may not be used for any purpose without the explicit written permission of the Sioux Falls League of Women Voters. So a couple disclaimers from our organizations. Although the League of Women Voters of South Dakota does take positions on issues, this event is an educational event and will not be used to promote league positions. In the spirit of transparency, league positions are available upon request. And OLLI is sponsored by USD and as such is underneath the Board of Regents. The views expressed in these presentations tonight are those of the speakers and do not reflect the official policy or position of the University of South Dakota or the South Dakota Board of Regents. We look forward to your questions, and we have note cards. If you'd like a note card, please just wave your hand and somebody will get you one, or if you have a question ready to go. The only comment I will make, and it's very selfish on my part, is please write as legible as you can. I'm not real good about that. So please, as legible as you possibly can. Couple reminders: please silence your cell phones. If you are going to have a conversation with somebody, please take it out in the hallway. For our speakers, timers are located in the front of the room. We have 2 volunteers tonight, and we'll hold up signs that will let you know when you have 30 seconds left and when your time is up. For those of you who don't get to see that, it is a nice bright sign that says, stop. And thank you for following those time limits, and if you should go over the time, I will help you. A reminder from the audience to refrain from any actions that would potentially disrupt or delay the questions and responses, including applause, hand gestures, or raising signs. If you cannot abide by these rules, you may be asked to leave. So tonight, we're going to go ahead and start on the first one, which is Initiated Measure 28, prohibiting taxes on anything sold for human consumption. And we didn't flip a coin because we have one speaker here and the other one should be walking in shortly. So with that, I'm going to turn it over for the 7 minutes to Nathan Sanderson, who is the Executive Director of the South Dakota Retailers. Nathan.
Thank you. Good evening. Again, my name is Nathan Sanderson. I'm the Executive Director of the South Dakota Retailers Association, and I'm part of a broad coalition of 41 different organizations that's encouraging South Dakotans to vote no on Initiated Measure 28. You guys are going to have 7 different things to vote on the ballot. You're going to have 4 constitutional amendments, 1 referred law, and 2 initiated measures. This is Initiated Measure 28 we're talking about, which, as was mentioned, seeks to eliminate the state sales tax on anything sold for human consumption. So I think this is really important to note. I have the official measure right here, and the first sentence reads this: notwithstanding any other provision of law, the state may not tax the sale of anything sold for human consumption, except alcoholic beverages and prepared food. Why would 40 different South Dakota organizations be opposed to such a measure? Well, let me read you the definition of tobacco product. This is in South Dakota Law 3446-1. The definition of tobacco product: any item made of tobacco intended for human consumption, including cigarettes, cigars, pipe tobacco, and smokeless tobacco and vapor products. Let me read you the definition of electronic smoking device, also in that same section of code 3446-1. Any e-cigarette, e-cigar, e-pipe, e-hookah, or vape pen containing or delivering nicotine or any other substance intended for human consumption that may be used by a person in any manner for the purpose of inhaling vapor or aerosol from a product. Let me read you the last definition. I promise this is the last one I'm going to read. The definition of cannabis product in South Dakota law. Cannabis products are any concentrated cannabis, cannabis extracts, and products that are infused with cannabis or an extract thereof and are intended for use or consumption by humans. The term includes edible cannabis products, beverages, topical products, ointments, oils, and tinctures. So here we have a measure that would prohibit the state from taxing anything sold for human consumption. And here we have tobacco products, vaping devices, and cannabis products that include in their very definitions the term intended for human consumption. IM 28 is much, much broader than just food. As we saw from the Nonpartisan Legislative Research Council here recently, IM 28 would have a negative impact to the state of up to $646 million every year. That's 46.5% of our state sales tax collections. And we believe that that's setting us up for either deep cuts to things like education, healthcare, state employees, or it's setting us up for increased property taxes or an income tax. The money's going to have to come from somewhere. The second major reason why our organization or coalition is opposed to this is related to the second provision. So there's 2 sentences in IM 28. The first is, as I mentioned, notwithstanding any other provision of law, the state may not tax the sale of anything sold for human consumption except alcoholic beverages and prepared food. That's the first sentence. The second sentence says, municipalities may continue to impose such taxes. So why is it that the South Dakota Municipal League is part of our coalition of 40 organizations opposed? And why have now 65 South Dakota cities and towns passed resolutions in opposition to IM 28? Why is that? Because South Dakota Law 1052-2 says that a municipality can only impose sales taxes on the same items that the state can impose sales taxes on. So if IM 28 passes and the state can't tax anything sold for human consumption, neither can a municipality. The Municipal League estimates that IM 28 would cut cities and towns to the tune of $51.5 million. In places like Sioux Falls and Rapid City, that's about 8.4%, so it'd be about $12 million to Sioux Falls. But it's more acute in small communities. If you're a small community like Bone Steel, that's 59% of your sales tax revenue. If you're Woolsey or if you're Roslyn, that's 40% of your sales tax revenue. And so IM 28, which purports to eliminate the sales tax on food, doesn't have the term groceries in it at all. It is clearly much broader than just a sales tax on food. Now, the governors a couple of years ago attempted to eliminate the sales tax on groceries. That was fundamentally different than IM 28 in two really important ways. The first way that governor's bill was different is that it referred to food and food ingredients, not the term anything sold for human consumption. Food and food ingredients are defined in South Dakota law and are limited to groceries. Human consumption is not defined, but as I noted, the term is used in a number of different definitions in state law. That's the first way that the governor's bill was different from IM 28. The second way that the governor's bill is different from IM 28 is that the governor didn't eliminate the sales tax. The governor's bill set the state sales tax rate at 0. Why is that important? Because in 1052-2, and I'll read the specific language now, it says that a municipality can only charge a sales tax if it conforms in all respects to the state tax on such items with the exception of the rate. So if the state rate is 0, but they're continuing to impose the tax, then municipalities would be able to collect that tax. That's why the governor's bill included those terms, food and food ingredients, and set the rate at 0. It didn't eliminate it. And so no matter how you feel about the concept of taxing food, IM 28 doesn't do what its proponents say that it does. It's going to cost up to $646 million to the state. It's going to cause a negative hit to cities and towns to the tune of $51.5 million. It's going to set us up for deep cuts to things like education and healthcare, or it's going to lead to higher property taxes or an income tax. That's why a broad coalition of more than 40 groups is opposed to IM 28, and that's why 65 municipalities around the state have passed resolutions in opposition to IM 28. Thank you.
Nathan, thank you for your opening comments. And we're still waiting for a second speaker, so I need to punt.
I came in a little bit late. Will it be time for questions or something?
Yes, yes. How about if I just take a second and go over that again while we wait for, he's in the parking lot. So going through some rules will be a great thing for us to go through and do. Yes, each of the speakers have 7 minutes tonight to provide their opening comments, and then we will go into questions from all of you, and we invite you to get a card, or let us know that you've got the card. I'll just go over the timing for us again, and they have 90 seconds to respond to a question, and we do not have rebuttals, nor will we do closing comments, because we know that we've only got 30 minutes for the total presentation in order to do. So, can you tell I'm trying to kill time?
If you want, you can cut it out of my time later on. You can cut it out of my time later on.
Yeah, okay. We'll go ahead and start with that. Good thing about South Dakotans is they're flexible, if nothing else. So one question that came up is, how is it that the LRC fiscal note from January 2003 says the state would see a $123.9 million reduction in sales tax revenue, but they now say it could be up to $646.2 million in lost revenue?
That's a phenomenal question. So the first LRC estimate came out in December 2023, and the most recent estimate came out here this last summer. And so obviously there's some updating to that. What they did in December of 2023 was they said it would be $123.9 million if it included only food. In the most recent update, they said it would be $133 million if it included only food, and an additional $43 million if it was tobacco, and an additional $300 million if it included services, and an additional $90 million if it included energy. And so the LRC update both increased the number for food and then utilized the potential for IM 28 to impact a whole host of things, as I noted in my definitions.
Nathan, thank you very much. We welcome Rick Wyland, who is our presenter on the vote yes side. And I know you just walk in and you're ready to go right away. You can use the rocker switch on there to turn that on. You have
Test.
7 minutes, and the volunteers in front will, if you get to that, we'll hold up a note for you.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Rick.
Well, I am 22, will be on the ballot. What's that? 28, excuse me. Be on the ballot this November. We collected about 25,000 signatures, having gone through the process where you go to the LRC and you get language, and you go to the Attorney General's office, you get an explanation, then you go out and collect a bunch of signatures, and it did qualify. The catalyst behind I Am 28 is really the fact that South Dakota is only one of 2 states that still collects sales tax on food at the full allowable rate. The other state's Mississippi, and the makeup of their legislature is very similar to ours, about 95% controlled by the Republicans, and they're actually talking about doing something with their sales tax on groceries in the next legislative session. According to Feeding South Dakota, there are about 106,000 people in South Dakota, more than 10% of our population, that are food insecure, meaning they don't know where their next meal's coming from. 1 out of 6 of those are kids. Low-income families spend upwards of 30% of their household income just to feed their families, as opposed to families of higher means spending around 7%. So, this becomes, sort of a humanity moral issue here in terms of, do we want to be the last state in the United States to actually do something about this? 40 other states have taken care of it at some level. They've either reduced the tax, they've gotten rid of the tax, or they've created rebate credit programs, but not here in South Dakota. Okay. So, here we are, a few weeks out from this election, and you're hearing a lot of information coming, especially from the other side. They call themselves South Dakotans Against an Income Tax. I believe that's the name of their group. And they have a lot of organizations involved in this. Now, I'm here to give you the facts instead of the hypotheticals and disinformation, which is coming from the other side. So when we went through this process with the LRC, we got a fiscal note. That fiscal note was based on the language that we provided, okay? And I want to read you real briefly, in case you don't remember what it said. It said, notwithstanding, this is the petition, any other provision of the law, the state may tax the sale of anything sold for human consumption except alcoholic beverages and prepared food. Municipalities may continue to impose such taxes. There's a fiscal note that they're responsible when you're either giving money back to the taxpayers or taking money away from the state, whatever your preference is in terms of that perspective. But their fiscal note, which went along with the petition that 25,000 people signed, said beginning July 1st, 2025, the state could see a reduction in sales tax revenues of $123.9 million annually from no longer taxing the sale of anything sold for human consumption except alcoholic beverages and prepared food. Municipalities could continue to tax anything sold for human consumption. So that's what the voters signed up for. That's what the $123.9 million was. It was based on taking the state's tax off of food. And if you don't want to just take my word for it, this story broke last week, and this is a story that Dakota News Now ran because I had interviewed with them. I said, well, just call the LRC and the Secretary of State's office, and you'll get the truth. So they did, and the South Dakota Secretary of State's office confirmed Tuesday there's no provision in the law that allows for changes to a measure's language now that the measure has already been certified. Therefore, a yes vote on the measure would mean that human consumption cannot have any further elaboration at the polls. Okay, so I know you've heard from Nathan. I've heard from him a few times as we've traveled the state or been involved in Zooms. But there's a bunch of misinformation coming at you as voters, and hopefully like I said, don't take just my word for it. Do your own research. Get on the Secretary of State's office website and you'll see what I'm talking about. The Municipal League, which is part of their South Dakotans Against an Income Tax group, has been sending around information to all these communities, scaring the hell out of them that they're going to lose their right to tax groceries, to tax food. And that should be of some concern to them if it were the truth, but it's not the truth. Here's what the Legislative Research Council says in that story. In speaking with the Legislative Research Council, municipalities may have the chance to tax anything sold for human consumption if IM 28 passes, because a later law would take precedent over an earlier law. Okay? So you're hearing a lot about, well, they're going to lose their tax base. They're going to have to, stop fixing roads and bridges, and it's going to just cause holy havoc on their local economy. It's just not true. And, like I said, you don't have to just take my word for it. Dakota News Now did a great investigative report on this. Look it up. The Secretary of State, the LRC, and the Attorney General have all said, one, you can't change this whole idea of consumption when the fiscal note is based on $123.9 million, which was the tax they took off of food for the state to come to that number. And you can't just say because there's something in the code, in the state law that says municipalities are going to get screwed over on this. That's just not true, because this law, when it passes, supersedes all the existing laws. And the LRC, the Secretary of State, and the Attorney General have said, they've said it in paper, and they've said it publicly, that municipalities can still continue to collect the tax. That's what this is all about. We've been at this for 20 years trying to do something with this food tax. It's never gotten through peer, and we happen to live in the state that started direct democracy back in 1898, where the citizens can organize, right? Go out, if they don't like the fact that the legislature's dragging their feet, they can organize and go out and
Rick,
collect
thank you
votes
very much.
and pass a law.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are now going to move on to questions. You have 90 seconds to respond, and since Nathan got a head start, Rick, so we're going to catch you up on the next question, on that question that he just answered. And how is it that the LRC fiscal note from January 2023 says the state would see a $123 million reduction in sales tax revenue, but now they say it would be $646 million in lost revenue?
Because the Appropriations Committee asked the LRC for new fiscal analysis. And as I said to you, based on what they told Dakota News Now and what they've told us, you can't change the meaning of consumption. Now, their campaign, as I said, it's a lot of hypotheticals: could, maybe, might, possibly. But the fact of the matter is that fiscal note was derived by the Legislative Research Council after our language was certified to be able to circulate. And that is based off of taking the state's tax off of food, not gasoline. I mean, if you look at, I don't know if it's been shared, they're suggesting that consumption could include gasoline, toilet paper, pharmaceuticals. That's not what this does. That's not IM 28. IM 28 is focused on the food that the state taxes, not the municipalities, just the state. And at the time that our fiscal note was given to us to circulate and to give to people who signed our petition, it was estimated to cost about $123.9 million. You know what? That's what you're going to see when you go into the ballot box. You're not going to see $646 million. You may see that in a TV ad or in a piece of direct mail.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and go on to the next question. I'm going to try and get us through two more questions yet before we go off this topic. And this next one is, wouldn't eliminating the grocery tax be the hand up instead of a hand out we want to use to support our community? Please speak to this statement. And we originally were going to go every other. So it would be,
I'll just
Rick
stay
would be
in there.
first.
Well, you want
Go
to go
ahead.
first? I think it's one of the most regressive taxes that you could have, is to tax people on what they need to sustain their lives and feed their families. And like I said, we're only one of two states that still hasn't gotten the memo. And, you know, it's time. And I'll say this, even the governor, who I have, probably not much I agree with her on, but I agreed with her on this when she was talking about it during her reelection campaign. She said the time is right to do it now. People are hurting, groceries are expensive, and we can afford it. We can afford to take that regressive tax off and give these working families a break.
Thank you.
Okay.
End of comments on there. Nathan, would you like to speak to that? Would you like me to reread the question?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. Wouldn't eliminating the grocery tax be the hand up instead of a hand out we want to use to support our community? Please speak to this statement.
I think the notion of having the lowest income South Dakotans not pay sales tax on certain items, particularly groceries, is a laudable one. That's why folks that receive SNAP and WIC don't pay sales tax on those items. I also think that in South Dakota, we used to have a program like that. It was eliminated in 2011 when our budget cuts were 10%. We had to cut $127 million, and that program was eliminated. And so if you're looking to do something for those folks, that's exactly the kind of program you do. But you don't cut $124 million out of the budget without a way to pay for it. And so the real question is, let's assume that we even agree. I disagree, and you all have heard me on how much the impact is, but let's assume that we agree that the impact is only $124 million, only. Are we gonna increase the tax to make that up? Are we gonna cut? What should we cut? Are we gonna cut education? Are we gonna cut healthcare? That's really the question. When the governor said, oh, we can afford to do this, that was before we went from 4.5 down to 4.2% and cut more than $100 million out of the budget. No one reasonably thinks that we could cut that 125 million and then also cut this 125 million on top of that. And for those folks who would say, well, let's just restore the sales tax rate up to 4.5%. We can't do that, because it includes food. So you're gonna have to go to 4.6 or 4.7 or 4.8 or something like that, which requires a 2/3 vote of our super Republican majority legislature. 94 out of 105 members of the legislature are Republicans. Do we think that it's reasonable to expect that they're gonna pass a tax increase with a 2/3 vote?
Thank you, Nathan.
I don't think so.
Thank you very much. We're going to go on to our third question, will be our last question on this topic. And Nathan, you will be first on this one. And why would ending food tax cause us to implement an income tax? Where would the GOP support for an income tax come from?
How did we get this measure? It's on the ballot, right? I don't think that the South Dakota legislature would vote to implement an income tax. But IM 28 is more than just food, right? And so if the legislature can't, through a 2/3 vote to increase the tax to make up the revenue, if they're not gonna vote to increase the tax to make up the revenue, where's the revenue going to come from? I think that it's very likely that if school districts are cut, you're gonna see property taxes increase. I also think that if school districts are cut because state has to cut its budget as a result of at least $125 million, you're gonna see individuals who go to the ballot to try and find a new way to fund these cuts. And I don't think that the legislature would pass an income tax. I don't think that's true at all. But I do think that it's highly likely that if we have cuts, we would see an income tax ballot measure in 2026.
Rick, 90 seconds.
Well, I just think that's ridiculous. I mean, they used to think that maybe the legislature would do this till I started pushing back and saying, there's no way that's ever going to happen, that the Republican-dominated legislature is going to pass a progressive income tax. Now they're throwing it off as a ballot initiative. They're using it as a scare tactic because there's no support for a state income tax in South Dakota. So just connect those dots. Also keep in mind, you know, in the 2025 budget, there's 1.4 billion with a B, sales tax exemptions and use tax exemptions. From everything in healthcare to agriculture to tourism. I mean, if you have a lobbyist in Pierre, you might have a pretty good chance of getting your members a tax break, okay, a tax exemption. But, you know, I'm just saying, who's out here representing those families that are spending sometimes over 30% of their household income just to feed their kids? That's what this is about. And you know, Twilliger, who's the governor's chief Bureau of Finance officer, when the governor was advocating this, who said, oh, this is not going to be a problem. Twilliger said, even with the most conservative estimates on revenue, this isn't going to be a problem, right? So, you know, they can say, well, where's the money going to come from? And they use $646 million. We're not taking the tax off of gas or toilet paper or pharmaceuticals.
Rick, thank you very
It's
much.
food.
Thank you. Rick and Nathan, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming tonight and addressing our group. And just as a reminder for people, this is live streaming on Facebook and, or no, on the YouTube website. So, and will be available later on too. So we're going to take just a couple minutes, flip speakers up here. And again, thank you. And we will welcome Brad Jurgensen and Dr. Bonnie Amdahl. On that side. Brad? Yeah. I'm Carol. It's nice to meet you. Okay, we're going to flip a coin. You won't call. Oh, thank you. Bye. I will probably drop this. So, did you call it? I did not. I don't think so.
Try Ron, we'll do it again.
Okay.
Heads.
Heads? Okay. That's it. So, you will be first. You have.
I won, we won, everybody, we all go, okay.
Brad Jurgensen is with the Yes on 29 ballot committee, and you have 7 minutes to present. The volunteers in the front will be watching the time for you.
I don't even have to do that, perfect, okay.
Yeah, no, they will go through and do that for you, and I think they'll let you know when you have 2 minutes left, 30 seconds left. And if you don't pay attention to the stop sign, I will help you
I appreciate that.
at that point.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Brad Jurgensen, and you know, we're speaking to the League of Women Voters, so I thought I'd first, since we have some of them in the crowd, this campaign wouldn't be anywhere without all of the women helping it get done so far. Deb Peters and Quincy and Amber from our office and Liz, and I mean, we wouldn't be in a good position to, I think, go win this thing right now if we wouldn't have the women helping us, so I sure appreciate that. It probably sounds like pandering. So first things first, South Dakota already did this. To us, this is just restoring the will of the people. This already passed in 2020. To us, we'd like to just get it back to where the voters already had it. Secondly, Yes on 29, at least specifically for this year in 2024, our big goal was to kind of try to remove the extremism from this conversation, right? I think voters have some fatigue on this, and 90% of this conversation is happened by 10% of the extreme. That's where you'll hear stats that don't make sense and stats that aren't quite modern and a little bit cherry-picked, right? So let's talk about there's kind of about 4 pillars that really matter in Yes on 29. First things first, this is removing the extreme amount of government waste that's happening, making a product illegal that you can use in 30 other states as a 21-year-old adult. So something that you get to do legally in Minnesota or Colorado, and then you get arrested in South Dakota, that now costs South Dakota a teacher's salary. That's so much government waste in a year where we're just extremely dependent on what the government can provide because people are stretched so thin. So just kind of modernizing this conversation to 2024 and trying to remove some of the waste is the first thing we'd like to do. I think Nathan's numbers when you talk about 28 is enough to sell me on it, right? Nationally, this is happening. We're being rescheduled. Where in South Dakota's history would we ever let the federal government make our rules for us. South Dakota takes pride in the fact that they like to make their own rules and they like to keep the government out of their own pockets and backyards and everywhere else, right? This is no different than that. And oh yeah, we already passed this one time already in 2020. So this is, once again, just restoring the will of the people. Then let's move to revenue. Not everything should be about money, but the same $104 million that's sitting in 28, right behind it at IM 29, money's right there, everybody. We can skip over the food tax debate a little bit because there's $104 million sitting in IM 29 and it's the easiest money we'll ever make. Right now, there's 13,000 medical patients, give or take. There's another set of maybe 13,000 Native American patients in their systems, and there's give or take 65 to 85,000 cannabis users. And those users are in the black market right now. Those are 21 and up users, 18 and up users, and they're in the black market right now. And none of that's being tested, none of that's being taxed. There's $80 to $104 million just sitting here in the state of South Dakota. And again, it's in a country where in 30 other states you can do this and it's monetized and it's taxed. I sit on the patient voice for the oversight committee, and we get half treated like criminals when we show up on something that's totally legal, and we've got a medical card, and we're just trying to, exist on something that's, again, being federally rescheduled. Every school has a bond vote coming up. Every county has a bridge they can't afford. Every municipality needs to pay for their cops, needs to pay for their schools, needs to pay for their roads. And again, the easiest $100 million, not to be oversimplified about it, but the easiest $100 million is sitting right here on IM 29. Kind of the third thing we'd like to talk about is safety. The cartels don't test. The South Dakota Cannabis Industries are the only company that is spending thousands of dollars to make sure a product is being tested. It's grown in South Dakota, it's tested in South Dakota, it's sold in South Dakota to South Dakotans by South Dakotans. The black market doesn't test any of that. There's a guy in the Sinuela cartel praying that there's a no vote on IM 29 because he gets a promotion out of this deal. We can't let extremism continue to have this conversation. We'll hear a lot about safety and children and et cetera, and we're not indifferent to that. I think the industry themselves are the ones that want to keep it out of kids' hands the most. But when we have to sit here and defend our product, when we have a generation of cops and nurses and frontline workers being killed by mental health illness and alcoholism, it's insanity to be compared to it at all whatsoever. It's not the dangerous drug it gets laid out to be. 2 minutes left. So, let's wrap it up a little. First thing is we want to stop the government waste on this. Second thing is that's tied to the easy revenue that's there. The third thing is the industry itself, when you make it safe and legal and tested and regulated, is the best way to make sure it keeps out of the hands of kids and reduces the black market. And lastly, the Republicans like this. Donald Trump just endorsed this, not to make this about Donald Trump one way or the other. The Democrats like this, independents like this, the tribes like this, the ranchers like this. 65% of the country is for this. If we let our extremism stop just modern progress, when this eventually gets rescheduled in the country, we'll actually be behind the 8 ball. It's just an unfortunate position for the state to be in at that point. So I don't even need the full, how many minutes? That's kind of our spiel. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to your questions.
Brad, thank you very much. Dr. Bonnie Amdahl is representing the Protect South Dakota Kids, and Bonnie, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. I'm here to tell you that the costs of legalizing recreational marijuana will be significant to the state, to society, and most importantly, to individuals, particularly kids, and there's really no benefit to South Dakota. First of all, if 28 passes, there'll be no tax, right? No tax income. Second of all, would it bring in taxes if 28 doesn't pass? Yeah, it will. But what he doesn't tell you is that in Colorado, they spend $4.50 for every tax dollar brought in. So I don't care how much money you bring in, if you're spending 4.5 times that amount, that's a cost. That is not a benefit to the state of South Dakota. He says that if you legalize, the black market goes away. Now, this doesn't make sense to me because you've got the illegal sellers out there right now ignoring the medical marijuana laws, and the medical suppliers were just talking to the legislature about how much the illegal sellers are cutting into their business. So if you're a businessman and you say, whoa, look at there, you legalize marijuana, recreational, you've got a huge new market. Yep, and the illegal sellers will say, oh, but there's a law against me selling. I'm just going to go away then because they passed a new law. That's not true, and it certainly hasn't been true in the states that have legalized. Estimates are that illegal sales are at least 3 to 4 times that of legal sales in the states that have legalized. And what does that mean? When you've got the black market there, that means increased drug usage, hard drugs, and no surprise there because marijuana is a gateway drug. ER statistics show that in Colorado, admits for opioid use and for methamphetamine have gone up since legalization, not down. So you've got additional crime, you've got human trafficking. All you have to do is go to Denver and take a look. Now in Colorado, they had the option to opt out. So some of the communities in Colorado, 60% of them opted out. That's not an option for South Dakota in this bill. And I think that each community should be able to choose whether they want to opt in or out. Let's talk about traffic problems. 25% of regular users admit to driving impaired every day. Every day. 60% say they drive impaired occasionally. That's who's going to be on the roads with you and your grandkids and your kids if you legalize recreational marijuana. Let's talk about the workplace. In the states that have legalized, tests for workers are going up for positivity. And those that test positive are 55% more likely to have industrial accidents and 75% more likely to have chronic absenteeism. That's who's going to be working with you and your kids and your grandkids if you legalize recreational marijuana. This does hit the kids hardest. Very few studies show a decrease in use. Almost all of the studies show significant increase in young users when it's legalized because the perception of harm is gone. The state has authorized the use of it. And a significant number of kids in Colorado say that they obtain their drugs from their parents. Accidental exposure for toddlers has skyrocketed in states that legalize. I don't know if any of you saw the Focus interview on KEVN the other day. If you didn't, please watch it. Dr. Lori Strong out of Rapid City testifies movingly about the kids she's been treating for these accidental overdose. Because you've got gummies, you've got Pop-Tarts, you've got cookies and candy. Well, the kids are going to eat that. And these kids are out for 4 days because their little bodies can't take that. They're being airlifted to Denver for treatment. And you're seeing increased use among teenagers. In addition, and for babies whose mothers are using during pregnancy and breastfeeding, we are seeing a syndrome very similar to fetal alcohol syndrome. So these kids have lifelong problems with learning, emotional control, etc. And finally, and this surprised even me, I gotta say, but I printed out the sheet out there. Texas is the only state that keeps track of substance abuse or use with child abuse deaths. 60% of child abuse and neglect deaths in Texas are substance use related, and the number one substance that those people use is marijuana. Okay? And why is that? Well, marijuana, today's marijuana is not yesterday's marijuana. You're talking about THC content that is sometimes as much as 20 times what it was in the 70s. So you have a significant increase relation to violence, paranoia, personality changes. It is the number one cause for psychosis admissions that are drug-related in California. Number one cause. We see permanent brain damage to young users by MRI. And even in adult users, 25% decreased neurocognitive function. These people struggle with lifelong depression and anxiety. It is the number one drug associated with teen suicides in Colorado. It's got a 30% use disorder rate, 30%. That's higher than alcohol. It also increases your heart attack and stroke risk. Nobody talks about that. The studies are showing 60 to 80% increased risk. And in the ER admits for young people, teenagers, and young adults, 47% increased risk of heart arrhythmias. Worse lung damage by CT than you see with cigarettes if they're smoking it. Increased risk for testicular cancer, ALL, etc. I think you can see this is an incredibly dangerous drug. And there's really no benefit to South Dakota. You're not going to make a huge amount of money from this drug. Please, please, for the sake of your kids and your grandkids, vote no on Initiated Measure 29. Thank you.
Bonnie, thank you very much for your opening comments. We appreciate both of you doing that. We're going to turn on to we're going to go to questions at this point, and each of you will have 90 seconds to respond. And Bonnie will get the first one, then Brad, and we'll get to the second one. Brad goes first, Bonnie goes second.
Great.
So for the first question, make sure I'm reading this correctly. What do you say to those who believe a regulated market with dispensaries who check IDs is safer for our children than a black market where the cannabis can be laced with a much more dangerous substance and sold by drug dealers who don't check IDs? Do you want me to read that again? Okay.
Well, first of all, you also aren't going to check once a kid has marijuana, whether he got it from a regulated dispensary or whether he got it from an illegal. And if you're a kid, are you going to buy it from the cheap source or from the more expensive source? And I will tell you that certainly the black market does not go away in any way, shape, or form if you legalize.
I think this country has been fighting the war on drugs for almost a generation now, and the exact amount of money we spend on cocaine prevention is the exact amount of money people, buy cocaine. It's time for a modern conversation that doesn't use cherry-picked extremism stats. It's just not as dangerous as it's advertised. It's just simply put not. I'm on the focused interview. I was one of the interviews. I'm on the oversight committee in the same meetings and interviews she's talking about. That's simply put not what's. I encourage you to go watch those interviews. I think you'll actually, 50% plus one of you will see it our way.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to turn over to the second question at this point, and this is Brad who goes first on this. Has our legislature forgot about public safety when it comes to pipeline marijuana in the workforce? I read that as written, but for this purpose, we aren't talking about the pipeline. So has our legislators forgot about public safety when it comes to marijuana and the workforce? And Brad, you're first.
I'm first on this. This is going to sound like completely strange bedfellows, but I think the two groups that care most about the safety of this industry are the legislature and the South Dakota cannabis industry. Now, they might have different means to the end, but I think they're the two groups working the hardest to make sure this is safe, tested, taxed, and regulated.
Yeah. Okay. These are kind of the same.
Don't even need 10 seconds.
I think they have, and I would just note that all the statistics I cited come from reputable medical journals. They are not ancient, they are current. And yes, last 2 years ago, they expanded the conditions for which medical marijuana was appropriate, and they decreased the need for proving scientifically that it was effective for any of those conditions. The one committee heard testimony from a well-known, world-renowned ophthalmologist from the Vance Thompson Clinic and totally ignored his testimony. I think it's a lot about follow the money. Did we learn anything from big tobacco? And I would note that in the KEVN Focus interview, one of his compatriots admitted it's a dangerous drug. He said that's why teachers and parents educate their kids on the dangers.
On that, we agree.
Thank you very much. We appreciate Brad and Bonnie joining us for the education of voters. We do not have any more questions for you guys at this point. So great opening comments, answered a lot of things for us. So we thank you for joining us, and we will take a couple minutes just to flip over. And at this time, I did ask that Walt Bones, John Sharda, and Joy Hone come up front. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you. Yeah. Enjoy the thing. So, we need to flip this, who's going first, or who wants to call it? Okay, I'm gonna put it on this so the rest of it falls. And it is heads. So, you guys will go first for 7 minutes, and then we'll go to you guys. Thank you.
We're gonna give them extra time then. Talk about this.
We're going to flip over to Referred Law 21, which is a referred act to provide new statutory requirements for regulating linear transmission facilities, to allow counties to impose a surcharge to certain pipeline companies, and to establish a landowner bill of rights. So joining us tonight on the vote yes side is Walt Bones, who is a former South Dakota Secretary of Agriculture. Voting no is Representative John Sharda and Senate candidate Joy Hone. So with that, we'll let you guys go ahead and get started. 7 minutes, and the volunteers up front will hold the signs up. And as you've probably noticed, if you don't stop when the bright sign comes up, I will help you. Oh, just hit the rocker switch on there.
Good evening. I'm Joy Hone. I'm Senate candidate for District 9, and I thank you for the opportunity to share this evening. I am a wife, a mother, daughter, a commercial pilot, and a family farmer. And I wasn't active in politics until the threat of eminent domain was used on our family multiple times. Recently, my family was one of among 160 landowners who were served condemnation papers by Summit Carbon Solutions. 1 year ago today, the Public Utilities Commission denied Summit's permit for a hazardous carbon dioxide pipeline. So immediately from that, they went from lawsuits to leveraging our state legislators. So fast forward to our legislative session. I'll talk about the Senate Bill 201, which has now been retitled Refer Law 21. The challenge for voters with no background or contents of this bill is that it's a complex 7-page bill. And the Attorney General summarized it in 2 paragraphs. So here's what's important for every South Dakotan to know in 5 key points. 1 is how it was written. It was born out of a backroom deal with corporate influence over citizens' voices and rights. It was led by Summit Carbon Solutions and by the state leadership, with landowners and concerned citizens left out, despite hundreds of landowners being present and testifying. It's changing codified law with no legal obligation from the developer. There is no application on file, and there's no permit that's been granted. Number 2, what's missing? Property rights. That's right. They're calling it a landowner bill of rights, but there is no rights. It does not address the core of the issue, which is eminent domain for property owners, nor does it add any protections from the misuse of eminent domain to take land for prospective economic development. South Dakota Supreme Court recently agreed, and they recently ruled that Summit Carbon Solutions did not have the right to eminent domain privileges as they had previously claimed. Number 3, what it takes away: control of local communities. It destroys power of citizens to protect themselves from hazardous pipelines through their local governments. The best decisions for citizens are those who live with the consequences within their communities made by local leadership. It's unprecedented change to South Dakota law. It's upending 135 years of South Dakota codified law, and it's stripping decision-making from over 300 county commissioners to just 3 state officials. For what? It's to pave the way for a prospective 12-year project. Number 4, how it was packaged. Landowner Bill of Rights. It's unlike the landowner Texas Bill of Rights. This is false. It's, it's falsely titled. It's designed and promoted to mislead the public. Why? Because there are billions in tax incentives that are at stake. And just to remind you, South Dakota is pivotal to the project as the direct route to the North Dakota sequestration site. Number 5, what's to come? We're setting a dangerous precedent for the future, empowering corporate influence over citizens' rights, prospective financial gains before foundational freedoms, and it's opening the door for experimental, dangerous projects. So what you can do is you can educate yourself, educate your others, please, on this unprecedented legislation that tips the scales to corporate influence at the expense of the rights of private citizens. And if you have a group that wants to learn more, or if you'd like to get involved, please contact one of us after the meeting. I'd like to introduce you to John Sharda. Recognize him for his strong support and championing of property rights at our last 2 legislative sessions.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you for having me here. I'm Representative John Sharda, a farmer and landowner from Valley Springs. I'm a District 2 representative, which represents Brandon, Valley Springs, and East Sioux Falls. RL 21 is deceptively named the Landowner Bill of Rights, but it doesn't actually do anything for the landowners, and I'll explain to you what I mean by that. One thing the law states is the carbon pipeline has to be buried at least 4 feet, but long before RL 21 or SB 201 was talked about, the pipeline companies had in their contracts they would bury it at least 4 feet deep, and I heard some people say that they negotiated even a 6-foot depth. So they were doing it long before this law was enacted or was talked about, so it really doesn't help the farmer or the landowners at all. The law also states the pipeline company has to repair any drain tile that may be damaged while installing the pipeline. That sounds great, but South Dakota law already has provisions in it that anything damaged has to be restored the way it was before. So again, a do-nothing part of this bill. RL 21 does make some minimum payment requirements and lets the county impose pipeline surcharge, but they only apply as long as pipeline companies are getting federal tax money, which could end at any time. So as you can see, RL 21 does not do anything for landowners that they couldn't have already negotiated for themselves. But RL 21 does something landowners do not want. It takes away local control. It takes away the right of counties, townships, and towns to be able to regulate where the carbon pipeline can go. Right now, in Minnehaha County, for example, you cannot put a carbon pipeline within 330 feet of the property line of a residence. That seems like a fair setback because it provides some safety for those who live near it. But if RL 21 becomes law, that setback goes away and they can put this dangerous pipeline anywhere they want and no one can stop them. And that's what this law is really about. How would you feel if this dangerous pipeline came right up to your front door? So I ask you to join the over 30,000 South Dakotans who signed the petition to get RL 21 on the ballot and vote no. Overturn this bad law and protect landowners and citizens from this dangerous pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you. Walt, you have 7 minutes.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Walt Bones. I farm with 2 brothers, a brother-in-law, and they've each got a son back with us now, so that's our 5th generation south and west of Sioux Falls here. My great-grandfather homesteaded out there in 1879. We were notified about a year and a half ago that the New Gen ethanol plant over by Marion, South Dakota, had signed on to the Carbon Solutions, Summit Carbon Solutions pipeline, and that the link between that ethanol plant and the main line was going to come through our property. So we're an impacted landowner. And in the negotiations and as we talked with the folks, frankly, they were very, very transparent. They're very open. We asked about safety. We asked about all these things. And to be honest with you, the pipeline runs about maybe 250, 300 yards right north of my house. Answered all the questions that we had. But we still had some real concerns about the depth, as Representative Stark said. you know, we both got tillage equipment that probably goes down 3 feet, you know, so 3 feet wasn't enough. There was some questions from our insurance agent as far as indemnification. If something would happen, if it would rupture for some reason, who's going to be liable? Who's going to be liable for that? There was a lot of questions about the term of the thing. The original contract was into perpetuity, a perpetual easement on our property. Again, we still own the property. It's just an easement going through there, right? I don't know. How long's perpetuity, folks? How long's a perpetual easement? Like forever plus another couple weeks, right? And so it's not only impacting me and my nephews, but my grandkids and my grandkids' grandkids' grandkids, right? And so that was an issue that we had in mind. And so there was a number of things that, you know, the drain tile that Representative mentioned as well. I mean, we've done a lot of work in water management and those types of things. So, you know, those are issues too. And so we heard that there was some provisions being drafted in Pierre. Representative Will Mortensen thank you, is an attorney, and he's also the House Republican Majority Leader. And he, again, his day job is an attorney, but he was representing landowners that were negotiating with Summit. And he saw that there was some concerns or some things out there that he thought needed to be fixed. And so he went along with the Senate Majority Leader, Casey Crabtree, got together and had listening sessions. They were listening to folks. I got involved with a coalition of groups that was impacted landowners, ag groups, farm organizations, chambers of commerce, ethanol plants, again, to bring our concerns out to Pierre and talk to the legislators. Again, the whole thing goes through the process, right? I mean, for you that have been out in Pierre, you go to the committee meetings and you state your case. You can talk to your legislators out there. They vote it up or down, and then it goes to the session, you know, the main session, and you know, you all folks know how the process goes. So there is a lot of opportunities for input. There's a lot of opportunities to talk. One of the other things that that was talked about was in there was another pipeline company called Navigator that went before the PUC, and one of the folks that testified said that, yeah, these things are in the contract. You know, some of these guarantees are all in the contract, but it really should be in state law. Another thing. So that was the genesis. That was kind of where this all came from. And I've given, hopefully you all came in as you came in. You know, you all got one of these. If you haven't, raise your hand. We'll get you one, but hopefully you all have one. This is what you're voting on. This is not a referendum on a pipeline. This is not a referendum on anything else. This right here is what you're voting on. And you can make it anything you want. You can wish it could have been better. It could have been worse. You know, that's the whole sausage machine out there in Pierre, right? You know, you get as much as you can. Don't get everything you want usually, but you try to get, and you don't let good be the enemy of, or perfect be the enemy of good, right? So there is some really good protections that will be in state law that are being proactive. I mean, these things are going to be in state law before the pipeline has even been started. So I think that is a really a kudo, I guess, to our state legislators for being proactive and being upfront and getting this stuff in state law before the pipeline has even, one shovel full of dirt's even been moved yet. So read through this. This is what you're voting on. Again, it might not be, you know, it might not be what you want. You might have different views on if carbon is destroying our world or not. You might have different views on all different issues. But bottom line, folks, this is what you're voting on. Nothing else, nothing more. Now, there is one other thing. This is what they call the Landowner Bill of Rights, all these different things here. There is one more thing that was put in there proactively by the legislators. The federal government on all linear pipeline projects have preeminence. That means anything running through the state, just like the Dakota Access Pipeline that came through the state here 5-6 years ago, the federal government has preeminence. They have the controls, they discern, they can do the setbacks, they do all the rules and regulations. They have preeminence on pipelines of a linear project like this. There's a case right now in Iowa where that's being challenged. The preeminence was upheld at the district court level. It is now in a federal appeals court. See how that turns out. Thank you. Proactively, Senate Bill 201 put in there that the counties have the right to go to the PUC to try to adjust that routing, go through there. Again, the counties did not, you can't take something away from somebody that they don't have. The counties do not have the power or the right to do this. As much as you think that they might, or they should, or that's fine, but they do not have that power right now. And Senate Bill 201 gave them that power.
Thank you, Walt.
Thank you.
Thank you. One person asks, what is the long-term economic impact on South Dakota with so few permanent jobs in the future? And Walt, you're first up on that. Would you like me to read that again?
Okay. Please, yes.
Okay. What is the long-term economic impact on South Dakota with so few permanent jobs in the future?
Of Senate Bill 201? That's what we're talking about, right? Is this Senate Bill 2 that we're voting on?
Well, they talked about it in relationship to 21. This is confusing because,
I agree. I mean, it's very confusing. And if I was advising these folks over here, I would make it just as confusing as possible. So that, because what's your tendency, right? If you don't understand something, you're probably going to vote no. Right? And so, yeah, it is very confusing, but bottom line is, we're talking about this right here. Right here. This protects landowners. And we can go into it. I would love to have a forum to talk about the economic impacts of the pipeline into farmers, into ethanol, into sustainable aviation fuel. We could talk all night long about some of those things, but that's not what we're talking about here tonight. We're talking about what is on this sheet right here. This is what you're voting on.
well, thank you very much. Joy or John, one of you would like to take that question?
I don't know if it should impact economic development, because they can still try to get the carbon pipeline through if this law passes. It just keeps the counties being able to keep the ordinances. Minnehaha County can stay 330 feet away, but if they can still find a route to get through Minnehaha County, it should not hurt economic impact.
And I'll talk on a couple of his other points here with preemption, and he said federal law dictates the preemption. That's more on the materials of the pipeline. The local governments, like your counties, they have the authority, and I have the documentation from the Federal Pipeline Hazardous Materials and Safety Administration that says that counties can route those pipelines and put the necessary setbacks in there. So it is really the county's responsibilities to determine the safe distances from these hazardous pipelines, because every county is different. And he's also saying that you're voting on what he has on his sheet. Well, a lot of the information on his sheet was also two other bills that he put on there, which is House Bill 1185 and 1186. And so some of that information on that sheet is not what you're voting on. And there's misinformation as far as the local control. I mean, what it is it's burden shifting that local control. It's taking it from the counties have it in place, these setbacks in place, and the pipeline company would have to prove that those setbacks are unnecessary. And now they're burden shifting that to the county, and now the county has to prove to our Public Utilities Commission that those distances are too much.
Thank you very much. Question number 2, which starts with John and Joy. I got my cheat sheet up here to go through and do. Just for clarification, can you discuss how this Bill of Rights does or does not give counties the ability to do any regulation? Does it or does it not? Just for clarification to go through and do that.
Well, I think I kind of answered
Yeah,
that
yeah.
in that last statement that I said, but once again, the counties, it's taking the burden shifting from the pipeline companies to prove to the Public Utilities Commission that those setbacks are too restrictive for their pipeline. And it's placing that burden now on the counties that have done, lots of research and have went through all the process to put these setbacks in for the dangerous pipelines. And now the counties are going to have to prove to the Public Utilities Commission that their setbacks are too restrictive. And I will say last year during the Navigator hearing, Minnehaha and Moody County spent 2 days in Pierre before the Public Utilities Commission defending those ordinances, and the Public Utilities Commission upheld those ordinances.
I'll just read section 6 of the law. That a permit for the construction and transmission facility, which is the pipeline, within a designated area supersedes and preempts any county, township, municipal, or any other governmental unit, land, zoning, building, rule, regulation. So it just says the counties have no say in where it goes.
Walt?
This is in the courts, folks, and I'll stand by what I said. Down in Iowa, the counties challenged the federal preemption and lost. The federal preemption was upheld. It has now been appealed to a federal appeals court, and that is in the same district as South Dakota is in. So this will all be determined in the courts, right? And I'll stand by what I said.
Thank you very much. The next question we will do, and this will be, start with Walt on this one. What is the benefit to the pipeline? Why do we need one? And wouldn't this law, where it talks about carbon dioxide, would this law apply to all pipelines then that go through? Or is it just targeted towards the carbon dioxide?
Most of Senate Bill 201 is just, right now, applies to the carbon dioxide pipeline. Some folks thought it was going to maybe apply to wind projects or highline wires or other things, and as far as I know, it's that. As far as the economic thing, again, I don't want to get off in the weeds and distract you folks, because this is what we're voting on, okay? But in that is a $1 a foot assessment per linear foot. That's an economic advantage to the counties, which is going to make it's going to be about $3.6 million. Half of that will go rebated back to the affected landowners, such as myself, in the form of property tax relief. The other half goes to the counties to be used as they want. So if this passes, your counties and the affected landowners will have a definite economic benefit.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, this law just does apply to carbon pipelines right now, how it's written. And as far as the economy, or economics for the farmers, or ethanol, so right now, ethanol plants take corn, they turn it into ethanol, dry distillers grain, they have a tangible product that they sell, it increases the value of the corn. The pipeline is just trying to take the carbon away to make a score be lower so that people will pay more for something that is exactly the same, but they have some reason to think that it's more value. It's just a made-up number. It can change at any time. We can put the pipeline in, lower the CI score. Whoever makes this number can decide that they want to figure it different. So we're just chasing after intangible things. And also, there's new technologies coming along too. Like we can capture the carbon right on site at ethanol plants, turn it into another form of energy called green methanol, have a product to sell, get rid of the carbon, and have something tangible to sell. So we're way too early in this game to be saying there's only one way we can do this. There's new technologies coming along.
Thank you. Since this is so confusing, I'm going to put you guys both on the spot and ask a question, just for clarification point, and this would go to you guys first. Passing this, or let me reframe that. Rejecting the law and saying there is no landowner's Bill of Rights. Am I correct on that then? Did I get that language right? Okay. Does that stop the carbon pipeline? That's been a very controversial topic. Does it stop that? John and Joy?
No, it does not. I mean, they can build this pipeline by working with landowners and not using the threat of eminent domain, which they have done really kind of since the beginning when they started this whole project. You know, they sued landowners for surveying before they even had a PUC permit on file or made that application. And then they sued 160 landowners before the Public Utility Commission hearings. You know, it's, you know, you've got bad actors coming into the state and they're, you know, bullying their way trying to force this pipeline. When you have a good project and you are doing this in good faith, and it's like your waters and electricity lines and your highways and whatever, you know, that's for the public good. This is not.
Walt?
Just for history's sake, okay? Just to give you an idea. When Summit first came into South Dakota, there are some tax credits that were going to expire here in 2025. And I'm going to be the first to tell you, how do you say this politically correct? They soiled their own sheets, okay? And I think they will be the first to admit that. They pushed hard. They brought in these folks from out of state and went to landowners and threatened, did whatever they could to try to get this thing done so they could get to these higher tax these tax credits that were going to expire here in 2 years. Those folks are all gone. Those folks are all gone. We're working with a different group of people right now. And one of the things that was put in here, you'll notice, is number 9, that all of these folks, the land surveyors, the people that we deal with directly, now must all be from Sioux Falls South Dakota. And so we got South Dakotans talking to South Dakotans, okay? I mean, that's a big deal. That is a big deal. And so we got a different group of people trying to achieve the same thing, frankly, but with a whole different attitude.
Walt, thank you very much. We want to thank Sioux Falls League of Women Voters and Ollie for this event. We appreciate Walt, John, and Joy all joining us for the education of the voters. We also want to shout out to John Fixdale and Media One for live streaming the event, and also to USD for letting us use their space. Next Wednesday, there will be another forum, and same time, same place. It will be addressing open primaries, abortion, and the Medicaid work requirements. Note that our forums will not be addressing Amendment E, which addresses the updating gender references in the South Dakota Constitution. You can find information on that in the handout and on the Secretary of State's website. Please visit the League of Women Voters website, vote411.org, for more information on statewide and legislative candidates as well as ballot issues. We thank you for putting questions together. We know that we didn't get everything answered tonight, and several of the speakers are still around yet. I know that they're going to lock the doors at 8 o'clock here. So we don't have to rush right out if you want to have a conversation one-on-one with one of our speakers tonight. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much to our volunteers for making all this possible. We appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.